the thing here, Michael, when I talk about being comfortable, legal groups are still battling. They're fighting the lawsuits.
Right.
And you've got others who I've heard, I've heard Derek Johnson, the NAACP, say on many occasions that protest is performative. But the reality is, in order for you to apply pressure on city council, county government, state legislature, Congress, is you've got to have external pressure. And so you've got to have the mobilization and the organization. Frankly, I've been disappointed in black leadership, black organizations, not pressuring Democrats in the Senate, Senator Chuck Schumer, President Biden, to bring the George Floyd justice bill back up, to force Republicans in an election year to deal with it. I mean, there were other bills, there were other priorities that didn't move, that people kept hammering. You see right now they're trying to bring back the border security bill, even though Donald Trump shut that thing down. What I'm saying is, this is where you've got to continue to apply pressure. I remind people, those three civil rights bills, they actually were all one bill that was given to Kennedy in 1961. He gets killed, assassinated November 1963. LBJ tells King, I cannot get all of this stuff passed at one time, so it's broken all up. It literally took 5 years.
Right.
Here we are, 4 years after the death of George Floyd. Where is the mass protest? Where is the constant, no, we're going to go after this thing again? Where is it? Do you see it? Because I'm sorry, I don't see it.
No, I don't see the mass protest, but we have to really understand end game, and it goes even beyond mass protest. It goes to actually winning in the end game and understanding how to put economic pressure on the obstructionists. Okay, because I have to say, if we go back to 2015 when you had the state of Indiana transgender bathroom bill. Okay, there were not a lot of protests, but there was economic pressure. And corporations were tripping over themselves to come out to put pressure on the state legislature in Indiana. And the governor of Indiana at that time was a gentleman named Mike Pence, who became vice president of the United States. And within about a week to 10 days, they changed the law in the state. Because of economic pressure. So one of the things, when we talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, one of the things that I think needs to happen, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, is not just on Democrats, but also Republicans who are obstructionists, especially in the Senate. Put economic pressure on them. Go FEC.gov, Federal Elections Commission. Look at the top 5 corporations that donate to some of these Republican senators, and look at the states that have the most numbers of white people killed by police. Bring in crying white mothers to Senate hearings with pictures of their loved ones unjustly shot and killed by police. See, the game, the way some of these groups are moving and playing, they're trying to fight the good fight when they should be taking these people's heads off. And they're not playing to win. They're playing to, we're confusing activity with productivity. They're not playing to win in the end game. When we look at the Voting Rights Act, okay, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the same thing. You had 150 corporations that signed on to a memo, I think it was June or July 2021, that said they supported the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So instead of nationwide pressure being put on the top 4 or 5 who finance Republican obstructionists, you had people just marching and protesting and getting arrested in front of the White House. That's good, but the people who need the pressure don't care if you get arrested. The people who are obstructionists don't care if you get arrested. You have 16 sitting U.S. senators right now who in 2006 voted to reauthorize the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and every last one of them, including the other 34 Republican senators, voted against the John Lewis vote, even though they all talked about how great John Lewis was. So there's a difference, and there's a phrase in the African American community, and you all have probably heard it: the struggle continues. I don't use that term. I use the term "it's not over till we win," because to continue to struggle, you need an opponent to struggle against. If you focus on whipping their goddamn ass and defeating them, you don't have nobody to struggle against. We need to focus on winning as opposed to struggling.
4 years tomorrow marks the day when George Floyd's life was snuffed out of his body in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That murder just galvanized the country as so many people around in America, around the world, protested over what they saw was police brutality, with the neck being placed on his back. As we said, protests happen all around the country. They continue today. Of course, there's been a week of activity in Minneapolis as folks have taken to the streets there protesting change. But a lot has changed in the last 4 years, yet we still do not see a bill that deals with criminal justice reform that was blocked in the United States Senate by South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Pholinise Floyd is the brother of George Floyd. He's also the president of Foundation. He's joining me now from Baltimore, Maryland. Pholinise, glad to have you with us. First of all, I'm here in Houston, of course, hometown. I was at my high school today, Jack Hayes High School, the same high school that George Floyd attended as well. And so certainly glad to be here. It's always a tough day, though, for us to do this show, because we're talking about, again, your brother being killed by Minneapolis police. When you look at 4 years later, what do you see that has been positive change that in the wake of the death of your brother in this country?
Well, honestly, I really don't see a lot of positive change. They implemented laws. They implemented things for the bill, meaning that they had the no-knock warrants for Breonna Taylor. They had the no-chokehold law established for Eric Garner, my brother George Floyd, and so many others. You think about how they said, spoke about the database. People can't just have a job in Washington, then go get a job in Baltimore. But the thing that I want to focus more on is qualified immunity, because you have to have an understanding that people, they have these dash cams and they steady killing us, and then they want to turn the cameras off and act like they didn't kill us. And I don't care where you at and who you talking to. We got to talk to kids the same way. And they could be second grade, third grade, fourth grade. We got to explain this over and over again. Qualified immunity, qualified immunity, qualified immunity over and over to tell these kids what's going on in America.
In fact, there was a federal judge who recently, in his ruling, ripped the Supreme Court's decision on qualified immunity and said that needs to be seriously reviewed and changed. And it was the black federal judge in Mississippi.
Let me tell you something. Qualified immunity always needs to be respected, because you got too much going on in this world right now. You look at what just happened to Roger Fortson. He was murdered right there in his steps. And the police officer, when he opened the door, he had his gun pointing toward the ground. The officer shot him 6 times. And then he said, put the gun down. How can you not sit there and make sure this qualified immunity bill is here? I was just in Washington, and it passed in the House, and we spoke there about it. But right now, we're waiting on the Senate to open up.
And, I mean, look, the Dems still have a very narrow margin. At the end of the day, they need those 10 votes, and I don't see the path for Republicans. Are you and other family members, I suggested this even, last year, a couple of years ago, that I really believe that you and others should come to Capitol Hill, demand Republicans come to the table with President Biden and say, take another stab at it, and let's get this done in this election year. And then let's see, put folks on the record to see who is for this and who is not, who is against it.
You're right. And I believe that too. But, it's only a one-man show. It needs to be spoken to the people in the Senate. But at the same time, if he has the power, because he made this law of the land, so if he can sit there and bring these people to the table, that will be a done deal and a sealed deal for me, for them to establish the opportunity to change this law. Because people like Timothy Eugene Scott, he don't care about his own people. He's a black man. I know he's been arrested before. I know he's been pulled over before. And at the same time, it's racism everywhere around this world. And we're living in it. This is a political fantasy that a lot of these people living on, and they're trying to bring this shady government back to the Stone Ages.
That is the case. One of the areas that what we've also seen is in the wake of your brother's death, a lot of companies that were committing themselves to diversity, equity, inclusion. We began to see last year a retreat. A lot of folks getting rid of DEI, laying folks off. We've seen Republicans getting rid of it in colleges and universities. And I kept saying to people then, you got to keep your foot on their necks, because white America has always, in the history of America, 2, 3, 4, 5 years after the fact, had a focus, and all of a sudden just went by the wayside. That's what we're seeing happening here.
Oh, yes, sir. They're not trying to implement any of these laws. They're trying to walk away from everything. Brown and black people, we've been living in this treacherous world for a long time. And this same world I was born in, this is the way that I found it, and I'm not trying to leave it like this right now. We're trying to get accountability for all nationalities. We need people to be able to be respected as citizens and not second-class citizens. This is somewhere where I want my respect, because I need respect like air. I need it to survive. That's what I need right now. And we need to constantly get out here and protest and stand in these people's face and let them know we're not going nowhere, and we demand that we get qualified immunity.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is it has to be left up to the states. Republicans are hardening on this. You got Republican governors like Greg Abbott. He pardons this white racist who killed a Black Lives Matter protester there. You've got in Missouri, the governor is saying he may very well pardon a police officer who was convicted as well. And so it is as if we learn a lot. There were people who were focused in the first year or two, but focus has waned ever since. What do you want to say to all the people, black, white, Latino, Asian American, in America but across the world, who are rallying, who are protesting, who were so energized in the wake of your brother's death? What do you say to those folks who, frankly, gone back home and forgot what took place 4 years ago?
I want them to open up their mind, and I want them to get out and step out on faith, and let's demand that we get these laws changed right now. We don't have time to sit here and play with these people. We went and vote. You know what I mean? I tell everybody we need to constantly vote, because at the end of the day, you don't gain nothing from voting, but you lose everything if you don't vote. And you got to vote for the right people in office right now. We can't be getting out voting for somebody who's talking about, I want you to, when you arrest them, bump their head into the police car, and before you put them in, and I'll pay for your legal fees. I don't want nobody to be talking about that if they looting, then they shooting. We don't need a president like that. We don't need a president making these derogatory comments about women. You know, women are women, and we need to be helpful for our women, no matter the nationality. I'm not racist. I don't want a racist person to be holding nothing accountable, because you're not here to do anything right. So if we got people like Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee, who stepped out when Karen Bass helped implemented this bill, and Cory Booker, all of these people, they walked in good faith, and all these people all around the world, got out and protested for my brother when it was in the midst of a pandemic that let you know where we stand, because a lot of people said that wasn't right. They shouldn't have had that knee on this man's neck for over 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And they created a motion cinema picture for the world to see.
Pholinise, we appreciate it, my brother. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roland. Hey, it's a pleasure being here, and I appreciate what you're doing for Black America. You're putting everybody on Front Street, and I'm loving that, because I want to move forward, not backwards. I'm not going to the Stone Ages. I'm not going to be around picking cotton. I'm not racist, but I know what's going on. I've seen it all before, the same things that they're trying to take out of these books. I want to keep implementing this because people need to know, because there's too many people, bodies, who lost their lives because of this sensitivity of these police officers not wanting to do their job the right way. My brother's blood is on that bill, and Breonna Taylor and so many others on that bill. Tyree Nicholas' blood on that bill. These people need to be held accountable right now, and we need to get the job done. So people stand with me, and let's get up and fight, and let's get the right person in office to solve these issues that we got going on.
All right, then. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 2 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles. And I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay. I've been studying history 34 years now, do lectures across the country, been hosting the African History Network show 14 years. But we look at, there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at. The 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wapakamane, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class. Okay, so you can register for this. This content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $the AHN show through Cash App, $the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment, take care of what needs to be done.
Rodney, glad to have you on the show. First, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, we saw changes being made. We saw police chiefs and city councils and mayors some governors making changes. But what you've now seen is a backlash. You've seen Republicans in Tennessee pass a law stripping the Memphis City Council of being able to outlaw certain stops. You see Republicans in other states do the exact same thing. And so are you afraid that the further we get away from the death of George Floyd, we're going to see a backlash, if you will, and a continual retreat from the progressive policies that we saw being put in place?
Yes. I think quite often what we see politically is when we see increases or decreases in crime, it becomes a tool for political conversation. And it is concerning when you start to see politicians decide to have such an impact as it relates, or their hands involved in addressing crime as opposed to the police chief. It does become more concerning.
Well, I think what jumps out at me is that when we talk about these police shootings, we've had Samuel Singawe on, and we've had an increase, and you still have people making these multi-million-dollar payouts. And look, we talked about Roger Fortson, what happened in Florida. We are still seeing people who end up dead after basic traffic stops. And so what the hell needs to happen for there to be real change in this country?
Roland, absolutely. When you look at the law enforcement in the United States, we have over 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And those different agencies train completely different from one another. And that's a problem. There's no universal understanding of how law enforcement is supposed to be operated in our country. And so you can have one agency do one thing right and try to work with the community to evolve, and you'll see another one go in the opposite direction. And so I think that plays a significant role when we have no general universal standard as it relates to how we police, how we relate to the community, and how we address issues.
And then we talk about that training. Look, millions upon millions have been plowed into training, yet we continue to see the problems persist.
Well, like in any other training, just like you see in the educational system, sometimes you have to take a look at it and see, just because you're being trained don't mean that you're getting the proper training. And we have to, again, make sure that we're taking a look at some of the agencies that we believe that are doing it right. Making sure that we're having conversations with the communities that we serve, and ensuring that we have the right training. You're absolutely right. Just because you're getting training don't mean that you're getting the proper training. Don't mean that you're getting the right training.
The George Floyd Justice Act, passed in the House by Democrats, gets to the Senate, fraternal order police, others brought to the table. It ends up getting stopped because of Senator Tim Scott, Senator Lindsey Graham. And Noble was not happy at all. You had Tim Scott saying, he was saying that, Democrats wanted to defund the police, and that was no good. Is it possible to get this back on track? Is it possible to put pressure on this Senate this year to get them to act? Because, frankly, it's still needed. And I don't know if you saw the ruling of the federal judge, the black federal judge in Mississippi, who laid out in very clear terms qualified immunity and the problems with it.
Yeah, I think that we have to re-engage as it relates to the George Floyd Act. As you stated, Noble was in support of it, as other law enforcement organizations, and we think that it is the right thing to do. We think that it is incumbent upon us to have policies and procedures in place to make sure that law enforcement is operating properly to protect the citizens that we serve. We have to do that. As it relates to the immunity, it differs from one place to the other. I think that having policies in place, having laws in place to ensure that law enforcement officers are doing the right thing at the right time is important. So we have to continue to re-engage, continue to fight, continue to have conversations with our policymakers. But I'll tell you this: one of the things that I think that is so important as we address this, and what is also missing is having the right people in these chairs, the right chiefs in place, the right mayors in place, because they too can adjust the policies to make sure, even though there may not be a law in place, there can be policies in place to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
I'm going to bring in my panel now. Joining me is Matt Manning, civil rights attorney, joining us from Corpus Christi, Texas. Dr. Cleo Monago, social architect, chief advisor, Black Men's Exchange, joining us as well. Michael Imhotep, host, African History Network show out of Detroit. Matt, I'll start with you. Your question for Noble.
So my question relates to qualified immunity, and the question is, what reform would you be in support of, either individually or on behalf of Noble, as it comes to being able to hold accountable officers who are demonstrably doing the wrong thing? I ask that because I understand why law enforcement wants protection, but we talk about this like it's a much larger conversation than it needs to be. Some of these are egregious situations, and you and I both know how difficult it is to hold accountable some of those officers. So what reforms in particular would you be in support of to fix that?
So right now, when we talk about it, I truly understand the position that people see when law enforcement officers aren't being prosecuted properly as it relates to the law. But again, I think that a great part of that falls on the DAs and the policymaker or the lawmaker at that particular jurisdiction. But we're in support of it. We're in support of holding law enforcement officers very accountable. And whatever that looks like, Noble's willing to be at the table and have conversation as it relates to it and address it as we see fit, because we serve the community. And if that's what the community desires, then we're supported.
Cleo.
Good evening. My question is Noble or Black officers united in a critical mass number against lethal injustice against Black people? Is Noble taking macro level positions against the mistreatment of Black people by their peers that are not Black, et cetera?
Absolutely. When we see a level of injustice, Noble is first organization to come out and speak against it. Now, we also recognize that there's an aspect that we have to ensure that the investigation is played out. But it has been my policy and to some of the preceding presidents that we speak on what we see and then understand that the investigation has to play out. And after that investigation plays out, we speak on it again. But we are very vocal as it relates to what we're seeing in this profession.
Michael.
All right, Brother Rodney, thanks for coming on today. When we talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and we talk about police killings in general, it's even though African Americans are disproportionately killed at twice the rate of white Americans, but each year, especially when we look at fatal force from the Washington Post, which is the largest database probably of police killings, each year white people make up 50% of those shot and killed by police. Now, we know white people are the majority of the population, 57%. But are there any ways you think that we can hit on this point and talk about how this is much larger than just a Black issue? Because this impacts all of America, not just African Americans.
Absolutely. You know, I think, and this is my position on it, I think any time that we start engaging and looking at it at micro levels, that's when people become disengaged because everybody believes that we are trying to play the race card when we know that there is a racial component to it. Right. Address it holistically. You're right. It's a human problem. It's a societal problem. But when you have these disparities, we have to call them out.
Right. Can I ask a follow-up, Roland?
All right. Well, look, we certainly, yeah, go.
right now there's a nationwide shortage of police officers. And a few minutes ago, you mentioned how police officers and chiefs and things like this can enforce policy, et cetera. Would this be an opportune time for African Americans who want to be the type of officers that we say we want to see to actually apply to these departments and gain power in these police departments and enforce these policies, et cetera?
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's one of our principal. One of the things that we're working on in Noble right now currently is going out to communities and going out to schools that typically don't get the attention of recruitment as it relates to law enforcement. We believe that if we have more people of color in this profession that resemble the community that they serve, that they can have a phenomenal impact on the policies that are in place. Having the right chiefs in the seats, I think, is so important. But that's one of the things that we're working with right now with the Bureau of Justice on making sure that we're getting going out to these HBCUs and having a conversation with these students to come into this profession to be the change that they desire.
Right. And want to see as well. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We can be the change we want to see. Thank you.
All right. All right, folks. Look, I certainly appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Keep up the good work, and we'll keep pressing the case as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, we come back, check with the panel about 4 years after the death of George Floyd. What has changed? What hasn't changed? You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Be sure to support us in what we do. Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. All right, folks, let's go back to our panel. Cleo, I'll start with you. 4 years ago, tomorrow, George Floyd was killed. Lot of attention, worldwide protest. Folks were focused. 4 years later, your assessment.
Well, when he was murdered, it was during the COVID-19 epidemic. People in this country, from racists, white supremacists, African Americans, everybody felt unsure, unsettled, not knowing what to do. We had never experienced anything like that before in our experience. So from my perspective, all of that anxiety and focus on George Floyd's murder, who was whatever the number is in terms of black men who've been murdered unjustly, the reason he got so much attention was because of the uncertainty around COVID-19. I've said that if it wasn't for COVID-19, what's his name? Donald Trump might have become president. There was some concern about him because of how he responded to that epidemic at that point. My point is that we're no longer in the COVID-19 epidemic in terms of public knowledge, so people relapse back to where they really were. And there is a sentiment in this country that is anti-black, that is anti-black male, and it never left. It was just on vacation during COVID-19. Michael mentioned that 50% of the people who are shot by cops are white. But there needs to be some more research on that because we need to look at whether they were unarmed or not. Also, there are small towns in this country, and I travel a lot, and I sometimes wind up in these countries that don't even report the murders by police officers in their country, in their state or city, because they don't have the mechanism or the incentive to do so. So again, just to summarize, this occurred during the COVID-19 experience. People were terrified. People were concerned. Folks were dying. There was a protest that was made up of young white people about a block from my office in the thick of COVID-19 against the murder of George Floyd. And I had to ask these white folks who I'd never seen before in this part of Baltimore where I work, what inspires you to come here? Why are you caring about George Floyd or the murders of black people, or this man in particular? And they kind of got catatonic and unable to articulate why. But I think it became trendy, and they were afraid of everybody, including black people and their wrath when they were feeling insecure because of the COVID-19 epidemic. Again, we're no longer in that epidemic.
Matt.
And the people.
Right. We'll go to Matt. Matt, your assessment, 4 years later, are we retreating? Have you seen some positive changes? Just your thoughts.
tiger can't change its stripes. And I think Dr. Cleo was hitting the nail on the head. That's why I was shaking my head. I think this is about a few things. First, I think a lot of what we saw in response to the murder of George Floyd was white people trying to absolve their own guilt about seeing a white person kill a black man on TV in a very graphic way. I think it was about absolution of guilt. I think it was less about standing up for right. And I say that because he used the perfect word, trendy. It became trendy. If you were on social media, everybody blacked out their Facebook profile. Everybody did every kind of hashtag and other movement to show that they were, aligned with standing against, police brutality. But the deep work that needed to be done to really attack some of the institutional things that perpetuate this was not done. And I think from a corporate standpoint, in terms of insecurity, to use his word, we saw a lot of corporations that didn't want to be left out. They were afraid of not being the corporation or being the corporation that did not respond publicly and say, we stand for diversity and all these kinds of things, right? The way we know that those stripes have not changed is the fact that corporations are now contracting the number of DEI jobs that they have. We're seeing a Supreme Court just on an all-out assault against individual rights, a lot of times via the context of racial questions, including affirmative action and some of the other things we've seen out of the court. So I think this is a temporary moment in time. I think some of it is based on insecurity. I think some of it, though, is based on self-interest, the self-interest of not being the one left out to respond to the topic du jour. But whether people were doing the deep work, I don't think it was being done. And every time I come on the show, I talk about qualified immunity. I'm so glad that George Floyd's brother was saying that, because I do this work for a living. And every time I file a lawsuit, no matter how egregious what the officer has done, I have to apprise my client that we have to climb Mount Everest in the Fifth Circuit, no matter what we're seeing, whether what we're seeing is just obviously morally bankrupt. So I tell you that to say we have a lot of institutional things that perpetuate this. None of those changed, and therefore I don't think the society at large has changed in that respect.
Michael, I think that I warned folks about this. And I think what happened, and I kept saying this to black folks, can't let up.
Correct.
Got to keep the pressure on. I'll be honest with you. I think a lot of black people, I think a lot of black organizations got very comfortable with the checks they received from corporate America in the first 2 years, and were like, yeah, we're good. And I was like, I was a firm believer, and I still believe this, that I kept saying that the death of George Floyd should have marked the beginning of the third Reconstruction.
Yes.
And what I've argued is that the reason I keep saying the third Reconstruction is that the first two Reconstructions dealt with laws. It never dealt with the money. And if you didn't, and I said there needed to be a sustained focus on economics, 20
Correct.
years at least. And I said, hey, y'all, look up. White folk going, hey, after 3, 4, 5 years, all right, we good. We done enough. That is exactly what happened.
It didn't even take 3, 4, 5 years to tell you the truth, Roland, because you're correct.
Did not get to the 5th year.
Yeah, you didn't get to the 5th year, but keep in mind, you started having the attack on critical race theory September 2020 when Donald Trump did an executive order banning critical race theory being used in federal employees, training federal employees. Then he attacked the 1619 Project. All of this stuff is connected. The attack on critical race theory, the attack on DEI, overturning affirmative action in college admissions, Ed Blum filing the lawsuit, not getting the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed because of Republicans blocking it, voting against it in the House, even though it passed the House because of Democrats. But Senator Tim Scott, that loudmouth Negro, Senator Tim Scott, lying about it, saying that it was pushing defund the police, and the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Police Chiefs in late September 2021 put out a joint memo basically saying your ass is lying. because they said in none of the drafts did it talk about defund the police, and they both and both organizations said they supported the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act because protect police officers as well as citizens. So what we see here is that there is always a backlash when there is any period of perceived advancement that African Americans make. And I was saying the same thing. If you understand history, that pendulum is going to swing back, and you have to be ready for it. A lot of people weren't ready for it, and some of those corporations that made those big donations, some of those corporations that are shutting down DEI, things like this, I think there should be economic pressure put on some of those corporations who finance some of these Republicans who blocked it, who are against it in the Senate, and who block it, who are against it in the House, to put financial pressure on them. Because Representative Sheila Jackson Lee just yesterday reintroduced the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in the House of Representatives. Right now, you don't have the votes right now. There's not enough. It's only 213 Democrats in the House, but this should be some type of campaign issue. And lastly, keep in mind, on the second anniversary of George Floyd's death, May 25th, 2022, for those who got, President Joe Biden did do an executive order on policing based upon his Article 2 powers, based upon the Constitution, that dealt with policing at the federal level, because the majority of control over policing is at the state and local level. So for those that forgot about it, President Joe Biden did do that. And 2 weeks ago, when Trump was speaking in Wisconsin, he said he would unleash the police. He said he would unleash the police if he's reelected. So keep that in mind in November 2024.
The reason I said this is on us, Cleo, is because I fully expected white folks, after a few weeks, a few months, to go back to business as usual. And you heard me say to Pholinise there, and because I said to the families last year when we were outside of my studios, that it's going to take them coming back and calling out Democrats and Republicans to say, get moving on this thing. And it's going to take that level of pressure. I think back again to how the 64 Civil Rights Act, how the 65 Voting Rights Act, how the 68 Fair Housing Act, how those things happen. And I just kept saying, black folk, don't get comfortable. Do not get comfortable. Don't get let me tell you something. I remember we would meet with General Motors after we had called them out on their black-owned media spend. And I told them point blank, I do not applaud you for press releases. I only applaud you for direct deposits. And I said that for a reason, and I just think that a lot of black organizations got real comfortable and were like, oh, hey, we're good. These things are going to happen. And now it's like, what the hell? And I'm saying, y'all didn't read a history book.
Right.
This is the history in America. Always happens.
But for black people of any sort to get, quote unquote, comfortable, in my opinion, it's a sign of a behavioral and perspective defect. Because if you're going to get comfortable because you're getting money and you're in a leadership position and you're not using it to resist, counter, or try to put a dent in the murders of black people, we got the wrong people, of course, in these positions. Because if you actually care about black people and you care about the life and death of black people, which I think a lot of people don't, including black people like Tim Scott and others, then you will not have the capacity to be incentivized into complacency. So I think that we need to look at some scar tissue that's generational among black people and fatigue. I said before in your show that over time, blackness and caring about blackness is losing its credibility, and people are going into wealth building and money focus. There was a famous song on the radio that you might have heard before that said, I'm living my best life. I'm not going back and forth with those N-words. And that was a very anti-Black, destructive song that was a top 10 hit. But the sentiment, I think, is growing among Black people. I'll reiterate, you can't pay me, and people have tried, to be lax and take a back seat or be complacent around the destruction and murder and killing of Black people by anybody, particularly the state or law enforcement. So I think some conversation needs to occur about the epidemic of anti-Blackness, and people bring up Tim Scott a lot, but Tim Scott represents a mindset that is so pervasive that we always protest something that's old temporarily. And we shouldn't be protesting temporarily so-called Black Lives Matter, et cetera. We should protest and resist until we've had resolution, frankly, like the white gay community has done and other communities has done, who everybody's afraid to mess with because they know people going to come for them. I don't think people look at Black people that way, or else they would think differently and we would be more protected. But we have people, like you said, who you said got comfortable, but I don't think they're comfortable. I think they're crazy, because if you're going to let somebody buy you into complacency in the midst of an epidemic of Black people being murdered that makes the news every now and then, that's a problem. We need to look at Black leadership.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point I'm making here, Matt. When I talk about getting comfortable, when I talk about folks are just like, hey, hey, we had a great 2021, 2022. I mean, I remember I was on a panel at the NAACP Image Awards last year, and I was going off, and folks were sitting here like, damn, dog. I mean, because it was a DEI conversation. I was like, man, you went too hard, and man, you should just like pull back. And I said, are y'all not paying attention? I said, this shit's about to end. I said, you can see it. Yeah, it was CRT. Then we saw what was coming. We knew the affirmative action decision from the Supreme Court and college was coming down. Then we saw that. Then now, what you're dealing with is now you got these folk who literally are saying, oh, that there's more racism against whites than it is against Black people in this country. And so then you're seeing the pulling back again of the laws in the state legislatures. Overruling is happening in the cities. The targeting of progressive DAs, all of these different things. And they're like, oh, crime. The attack on Chase Boughton in San Francisco, he gets recalled. They're trying to get rid of the sister who was the prosecutor in Alameda County. And so I'm just trying to get our folk to understand this thing is real. It's real. Yeah. And there has to be a recalibration in Black America. And, Matt, I just don't see it. I see Black leadership asleep at the wheel. And last point, we did not properly understand how pissed off they were at Black Lives Matter. Internally, they screwed themselves as well. But there was a targeting. People forget the Black Lives Matter movement was the first movement in the history of America where a majority of Americans supported it. And there were other forces that said, oh, hell no, we got to stop this. And I'm telling you right now, Matt, I can't tell you what was the last major BLM or Black Focus march or protest. I can't.
Well, maybe I'm cynical, but I think that presumes that was true support rather than support coming from self-interest. I think a lot of that was people trying to make themselves feel better and trying to make sure they didn't miss the topic du jour. But whether people were doing the work and continuing to do the work, they weren't doing it before and they're not doing it after. And I think as it relates to Black leaders, I think we have to be honest in our assessment of anything. And I think sometimes, we get too placated by sound bites and by a check and by getting, that one sphere of influence where somebody's getting a soapbox on which to trumpet their position. And it looks like that is tantamount to real progress moving forward with society. But we know that that's not the case, because not only are Black people being killed in the street, not only is unemployment still an issue, not only are a lot of the issues that we still have an issue, we see courts that are in an all-out assault against our rights and against the protections of what needs to be there to ensure that there is basic addressing of these inequities. And what we're seeing now, for instance, with CRT. The idea that CRT and here in Texas and in Florida and other places became this analog for blackness is still baffling to me, because CRT is a scholarship, a scholarly discipline that very few people understand, and it is not an analog for blackness. It's an actual scholarship, right? A body of scholarship. But we allowed that to become co-opted to be the thing that stands in for black people, and it has become the analog boogeyman, and we can't allow that to happen. So I think a lot of what the issue is, where we presume there's support, there's not true support. There's self-interest, and it's self-interest masquerading as support. But beyond that, the biggest part, I think, is I think sometimes we overestimate how dangerous we are viewed, dangerously we're viewed collectively. And what I mean is I think black people are unfortunately often expendable and leverageable. When it's advantageous to be on the train of a black issue, then you see people doing that, i.e. corporations. Once that tide turns, then you see them stepping away from that. And the question becomes, how do you have a sustained progress and a sustained force against some of these issues that is not beholden to other people joining us or joining us in a propensity that it really gets nationwide attention. And I think that's the issue, because a lot of those allies were only there as long as it made them feel good. Once that went away, they're not there anymore. And I don't know how, leverageable those positions still are.
The thing here, Michael, when I talk about being comfortable, legal groups are still battling. They're fighting the lawsuits.
Right.
And you've got others who I've heard, I've heard Derek Johnson, the NAACP, say on many occasions that protest is performative. But the reality is, in order for you to apply pressure on city council, county government, state legislature, Congress, is you've got to have external pressure. And so you've got to have the mobilization and the organization. And frankly, I've been disappointed in black leadership, black organizations, not pressuring Democrats in the Senate, Senator Chuck Schumer, President Biden, to bring the George Floyd justice bill back up, to force Republicans in an election year to deal with it. I mean, there were other bills, there were other priorities that didn't move, that people kept hammering. You see right now they're trying to bring back the border security bill, even though Donald Trump shut that thing down. What I'm saying is, this is where you've got to continue to apply pressure. I remind people, those three civil rights bills, they actually were all one bill that was given to Kennedy in 1961. He gets killed, assassinated November 1963. LBJ tells King, I cannot get all of this stuff passed at one time, so it's broken all up. It literally took 5 years. Right. Here we are, 4 years after the death of George Floyd. Where is the mass protest? Where is the constant, no, we're going to go after this thing again? Where is it? Do you see it? Because I'm sorry, I don't see it.
No, I don't see the mass protest, but we have to really understand end game, and it goes even beyond mass protest. It goes to actually winning in the end game and understanding how to put economic pressure on the obstructionists. Okay, because I have to say, if we go back to 2015, when you had the state of Indiana transgender bathroom bill. Okay, there were not a lot of protests, but there was economic pressure. And corporations were tripping over themselves to come out to put pressure on the state legislature in Indiana. And the governor of Indiana at that time was a gentleman named Mike Pence, who became vice president of the United States. And within about a week to 10 days, they changed the law in the state. Because of economic pressure. So one of the things, when we talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, one of the things that I think needs to happen, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, is not just on Democrats, but also Republicans who are obstructionists, especially in the Senate. Put economic pressure on them. Go FEC.gov, Federal Elections Commission. Look at the top 5 corporations that donate to some of these Republican senators, and look at the states that have the most numbers of white people killed by police. Bring in crying white mothers to Senate hearings with pictures of their loved ones unjustly shot and killed by police. See, the game, the way some of these groups are moving and playing, they're trying to fight the good fight when they should be taking these people's heads off, and they're not playing to win. They're playing to. We're confusing activity with productivity. They're not playing to win in the end game. When we look at the Voting Rights Act, okay, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the same thing. You had 150 corporations that signed on to a memo. I think it was June or July 2021 that said they supported the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So instead of nationwide pressure being put on the top 4 or 5 who finance Republican obstructionists, you had people just marching and protesting and getting arrested in front of the White House. That's good, but the people who need the pressure don't care if you get arrested. The people who are obstructionists don't care if you get arrested. You have 16 sitting U.S. senators right now who in 2006 voted to reauthorize the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and every last one of them, including the other 34 Republican senators, voted against the John Lewis voting, even though they all talked about how great John Lewis was. So there's a difference, and you know there's a phrase in the African American community, and you all have probably heard it: the struggle continues. I don't use that term. I use the term "it's not over till we win," because to continue to struggle, you need an opponent to struggle against. If you focus on whipping their goddamn ass and defeating them, you don't have nobody to struggle against. We need to focus on winning as opposed to struggling.
Well, I agree. And you know, what's going to happen tomorrow? You're going to see social media posts. You're going to see George Floyd photos and murals and things along those lines. This photo here is my high school, Jack Hayes High School. This is outside on the sidewalk there. Excuse me, on the street. That Black Lives Matter there, you still see it, of course, on the street there, outside of our studios in Washington, D.C. But the question now is, what are you going to do? And so I think a lot of folk need to be rethinking in terms of their strategies, need to be rethinking what their focus is, because some things have changed. Some cities have done some good things, but frankly, there's a lot of places that still need a lot of work to do. So we certainly appreciate it. Let me thank Cleo. Let me thank Matt. Let me thank Michael as well. This is Memorial Day weekend. Of course, something started by black folks. And so we wanted to focus this first hour on the 4th anniversary of George Floyd.
Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 2 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles, and I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay, I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country. Been hosting the African History Network show 14 years. But we look at there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at. The 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we'll look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wapakamane, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class, okay? So you can register for this. Its content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $the AHN Show through Cash App, $the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $the AHN Show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment,